Can I write a book in 30 days while closing on a house and moving? I'm sure gonna try. In today's episode, I'll talk about easy ways to build invincible habits for content creators so you can be productive no matter what. And I'll also give you an update on my progress. But first, let's start with a bit of inspiration. Today's quote comes from Albert Camus. Well, kinda. It also comes from the internet, but more on that after the quote. Anyway, Albert Camus won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1957 at the age of 44, which made him the second youngest winner in history. And here's the inspirational quote. He said, "In the midst of hate, I found there was, within me, an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was, within me, an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was, within me, an invincible calm. I realized, through it all, that in the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer." And that makes me happy, for it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there's something stronger, something better, pushing right back. Beautiful, right? So the interesting thing is that Camus didn't write this. He wrote part of it. The original quote was, "In the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer." This was in his essay, Retour to Tipasa, within his book, L'été, which is the French word for summer. The longer quote seems to have been an internet invention. In any case, it's lovely. And it ties well into the theme of resilience and finding inner strength in tough moments. So today's lesson is about building invincible creative habits. Just as Camus talks about finding strength and joy within himself, we can create small rituals that help us tap into our own invincible summer for creativity, even when that motivation is scarce. One of the most powerful ways to do this is by building habits and external cues that trigger our creative mindset. So here's how it works. The first thing you do is you can create a ritual soundtrack. I have found that building a playlist that basically functions as the theme to the books I'm writing, kind of like how a movie has a soundtrack, really helps me get into the mood to write. Basically, having the book's theme music tricks my brain into writing mode. This habit acts as a mental switch, telling my mind it's time to create. And it's not just something you can do with writing. You can use it when you're brainstorming video ideas or working on your scripts, or when you're creating visual art. Anything that you do, just putting on the music and say, okay, it's time for this activity. Over time, these kind of little cues become powerful signals, and they make it so much easier to start even on the difficult days. That kind of leads me into my next point, which is that you should use environmental cues. So it's not just about sound. In addition, you should consider setting up an environment that signals that it's time to work creatively. So what does this look like? Well, it could be a particular desk arrangement, or maybe it's lighting. Maybe you have smart light settings or a certain lamp you switch on when it's time to work. It could even be a beverage, a certain drink that you only drink while you're working. Whatever it is, it can become part of that ritual of creating. And the third thing I wanted to kind of touch on is something that I touch on a lot, but it's because it's very important. And that is the importance of self-compassion, which is being patient with yourself when you're making mistakes or having a rough time. On days when it's tough to get started, just gently remind yourself that creativity doesn't have to feel effortless. And I have found, in fact, some of the days when it was the hardest to get started, I do some of my best work, which is strange and torturous, but it's the truth. Just like Camus found joy amidst hardship, we can find small wins in simply showing up, even if the output isn't perfect. And if you're thinking about it from a training perspective, where you're creating this ritual, where you're basically training yourself to do this creativity trick on command, if you think about animal training, right? Animals that are trained successfully to do tricks for competitions or for movies or whatnot, they don't respond to being yelled at, screamed at, punished, and neither do you. Just gently redirect yourself to the right thing, keep those cues going, and you'll go a long way. Self-compassion always. And if you do all of this, you will build an invincible habit by repeatedly pairing your creativity with a soundtrack or other environmental cues, a ritual, if you will. You will train yourself over time to respond to these cues. And over time, the habit becomes invincible and a powerful tool for to push against procrastination or low energy. I mean, I'm very busy and I'm fighting the good fight, both on these updates and on the novel I'm writing. You'll note that I am filming from the Jeep again. It has been raining for a solid week here, a cold, ugly rain that makes it very hard to film outside or in our RV because it gets very noisy on the roof with the rain. And I am showing up in my rolled out of bed look, even got my headscarf on. But I wanted to show up and I wanted to make progress and to show you guys that it's possible even when you're busy, even when you're rolling out of bed and just fighting the good fight. Okay, so let's talk about how the writing's going. Just a quick progress update. It was a really tough writing session. So this book I'm working on is a funny paranormal mystery set in the Maine woods where I grew up. But there's also some serious themes in the book. You'll find that with funny mysteries, they often have crimes in them, which can be very serious. But there are also a lot of characters in the book that, like I did, grew up in Maine. They were born there, they were kids there, and then they grew into adults. Maine is a fantastic place to raise your kids. It's low crime, life is simpler and laid back there. Sometimes visiting, it's like being in a time capsule. Things are just kind of old-fashioned in a lot of good ways and bad. You know, there's pros and cons to it. It's safer than a lot of the other places I've been. But the job market isn't great there, and the cost of living is actually pretty high for a rural area. So a lot of the most motivated, ambitious kids end up moving away and living and working out of state. All of my high school friends moved to Boston and New York City, and I lived in Maine till I was 30. But then I also moved away, first to Cleveland, then to Dallas. And for a couple of years, I've been traveling the country with my husband in an RV, and we're about to settle down in the Pacific Northwest. So this book I'm writing, though fairly silly, has a number of characters who grew up in Maine and are still living there as adults. And they are struggling and grappling and dealing with the fact that Maine is a tough place to be ambitious in various ways. So this whole thing is near and dear to my heart, and it's a tricky balance in writing this book to being serious about those issues and treating them with the respect they deserve in the middle of what is otherwise a really funny book. Also, I had literally stopped mid-sentence in the scene that I was working on today, which wasn't helpful at all, and I was really mad at my past self. But I figured it out, and it's really good writing. The Albert Rogers chapter was an absolute mess when I started on it yesterday, and now it's finished and it's one of my favorites. Again, we're talking about how on the tough days, sometimes you do your best work. That was today. Today's writing session took an hour and 20 minutes, and I was writing the entire time. Not a big thing where I had to reread a lot to reorient myself or edit or do any of that or think. I was writing. I was going. On the house buying and moving front, we have the inspection coming up tomorrow, which is supposed to take 5 hours based on the property, according to the inspector. And Justin's going to be off work for a few days, and I want to spend some time with him while he's off. Plus, I anticipate we'll be negotiating between our agent and the seller's agent post-inspection, depending on what issues we find. So I'm going to be really busy, and I want to see Justin. So I might just do the writing side of the challenge for 2 or 3 days while I'm spending time with Justin and dealing with the inspection and the negotiation. And then once I have a normal work day again, when Justin's back to work and I'm out of the woods on the inspection, I will probably do like a big update telling you on how the writing went and how all that stuff went. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.